Flashdance is about a young woman who makes a living on a construction site whilst pursuing her passion as a dancer. We won't be dropping a bucket of water on ourselves like the most iconic scene from the film, but we will see if this early example of 80s pop culture holds up. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Girls gotta make a living.
This is a movie podcast. We are, for some reason, doing dance movie season, and today we are looking at one of the more famous dance movies of the 80s, and that is Flashdance from 1983. So, we're going to get into it. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. But before we do get started, I'll just remind you, if you're enjoying the show, do hit the like button if you're on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch. And of course, you can get bonus shows that me and David do over on Patreon. I'll tell you more about them at the end, but we'll get into it. Flashdance is a simple story about a young woman who is a sort of amateur dancer who has done it without training, but dreams of hitting the big time, of becoming part of a dance company. And she's also a welder.
I think the easiest way to describe the movie is a Steel Town girl on a Saturday night looking for the fight of her life. In her real-time world, no one sees her at all. They all think she's crazy.
David sent me with song lyrics. Like, I get what you're doing. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So, anywho, we'll get into it. I've never seen this before, which is... am I 4 for 4? Yeah. That's 4 movies in a row I've not seen. Until... obviously watching for
I'm
review.
expanding your palate, Peter. It's a good thing.
My palate was perfectly happy where it was. So we'll get into it. Obviously, after the weirdness of Climax last week, it was almost comforting to come back to a safer movie from a simpler time.
I as soon as it started and it was like such like a normal 80s song and normal dance routines, I was like, oh good. I don't have to be scared anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to start really, other than just to say, David, what did you think of Flashdance?
I am surprised how everything I knew about the movie was over with in the first 10 minutes.
Yes, I mean, don't get me wrong, obviously some of it does come back as well, but yes, the main song is right at the start for the opening titles, and the famous shot of the water splashing down on her when she's dancing is in the opening introductory segment of the movie. It's all done, and then from then on out, it's all just, what the rest of the movie is.
Story. As soon as the water thing happened, I stopped the movie. I was like, this better come back. This better be the first of many water things. Like, I need this in the climax. How is it this well known if this is the only time it's going to show up? And then...
that's the problem when everything's parodied something from the movie, but it's became the famous part. But so you go in expecting it to be. It's kind of like Dirty Dancing with the "Don't Put Baby in the Corner." That line was I felt I was supposed to be a big payoff. Like they'd set that line up, and it wasn't. It was a nothing line that just has been quoted so much that we thought it was going to be more important. Same with the water splashing on Alex here, which is the character's name. So,
absolutely. But no, to answer the question of what did I think of the movie, I think it's definitely got some heart to it. I think that there is... I can see why it's a romance movie first. I think that it does a decent job of setting up these characters and really making a realistic setting for everyone. This is, I think, the most realistic movie we've done in this season.
Whoa.
Okay.
Girl who's just turned 18 is working full-time as a welder and owns a giant loft apartment. I don't know if I agree with the realism aspects here.
I think the welder thing could work, but yeah, the giant loft apartment, that's just... I just accept that.
Doesn't that job require
movies.
Training? I feel like she needs to be certified to be a welder on a work site.
Well, I mean, I'm sure she could get training starting at 16, 15, something like that, and then
okay,
work her way up.
But you're pushing it. You're she must have just got certified a week before this movie started.
Also, there's no guarantee she's any good. She might suck at being a welder.
I don't know. She knew what she was doing. I don't know.
Yeah. But to end up that thought, I think that it does a good job of all that, but it is a very simplistic story. There's not even that much of a plot to it. It's kind of a there's slice of life story, I would say it was.
there is a plot, but the plot beats you could probably, like, if you cut out all the dancing montages, and it's a similar problem to Breaking and to an extent Dirty Dancing, where if you cut out a lot of the dancing montages that don't really add much by and large, like obviously some of them are important, but a lot of them aren't. If you cut out the ones that aren't important out, you'd probably get the movie down to about 40 minutes, and you wouldn't miss anything important plot-wise.
I mean, you take out the dancing stuff, I would say more so take out her friend subplots, because she's got two friends with pretty decently sized subplots that just kind of happen. They just are a different thing over there.
They're thematically important.
Thematically, yes. I will agree thematically.
They are thematically important, which is why I actually think that despite the fact that this is guilty of some of the same things that the others are guilty of, I would say this is a good example of like how this and Breaking, if you compare the two of them, why this is much better than Breaking. I don't think it's a great movie by any means. I'm not exactly in love with it or anything, but it's shot better. It's better directed. The music, by and large, I thought was better. Maybe that's just a taste thing, but
dude, the soundtrack to this was like, sure, there's the two like biggest hits there, but I was liking most of the songs that were playing.
Yeah, there's one like really weird, like artsy one when she was doing like a really weird like routine. That was like the only one where I was like, oh, this sounds a bit weird. I don't know if I like this, but the rest of it, by and large, better type of music. But admittedly, that's more of a taste thing. And I think what was really funny is that there's a random montage or dance sequence in the middle where they stumble on some breakdancing in the street, and I actually started laughing because I thought the breakdancing looked better than anything that was in Breaking, and I thought, that was that movie's whole focus, is that they had breakdancers. This movie has one scene of breakdancing, and it's more impressive than anything that was in that whole movie.
Yep.
But hey, it's not a canon movie. I guess that's that's why, right?
I was gonna say, this one, you got the producers of Bruckheimer is on this one, which that struck me as strange seeing that pop up here.
It's Paramount. It's it's a studio production, but it does suffer from a lot of the same things in that it does feel like a very, very anemic plot, and like we almost feel like we're just like going to more dance sequences to fill in time before the next plot beat happens, as opposed to them always. Obviously, the opening one is kind of important because it sets up what type of dancing she does. I also think it's funny that yet again we have another bit of that class system kind of commentary coming in with this. It's not as thick here as it was in Dirty Dancer or Breaking, but it is certainly still there. There's still moments of it. Who knew dancing and class structure were so intrinsically tied? But
oh yeah, absolutely.
Here we are. But yeah, I think generally speaking, it's better shot. There's actually some nice looking moments here or there. Like, basically the director, it almost feels like they wrote that she was a welder just so they could do cool shots where she's like, gets sparks and there's like smoke and stuff. Like that's why they picked that profession. One, because it was very blue collar, which I think is also part of the point. But the reason why they specifically picked welding and not, I don't know, pick another plumbing, right, is because they could do stylistic looking moments with her at the work site and maybe even dancing a little bit as the work site stuff's going off around her. So, which is to say, it's perfectly fine for what it is. Like, I can't get that enthusiastic about it. I can't be that positive because ultimately there's still moments that I felt like it was just dragging on. There's still bits that I just don't like. But I will say at least all of the character subplots for the friend characters do feed into the core story arc, which is that she's scared to take a leap. And the whole point of the movie is that you don't, just because other people take their chances and fail doesn't mean you shouldn't take your chance. And that's the whole point of that, is that she, every single friend she has in this movie, like, tries their go at a dream and seemingly fails. And it's all just kind of compounding on her. But of course, by the end, she's going to, and that's not a spoiler, I don't think. This is not a movie that's going to surprise you with its plot beats, okay? It's a pretty straightforward thing.
Yeah, I actually really like the main character. Her name is Alex, and I think that she is an extremely, I don't want to say complex, but she's very well fleshed out. Like, I fully understand her motivations. I understand her fears and why she is so hesitant to do this stuff. It's told very well throughout just the visual language of the movie. And then, like you said, her friends seeing how she witnesses that and then reacts to that in her own right. It does a great job of saying, here's why she isn't just doing the thing already. It's taking its time with it and trying to build that up.
Yeah, and a little bit of that upbringing things there as well. Is like, oh, she doesn't have the appropriate classical training. She's not been through dance schools and things like that, which, you know, all these reasons for her to doubt that she belongs where she wants to be, kind of thing. And there is the central romance, which it's like, I don't know, like the central romance almost was kind of the part that it felt weaker than everything else in terms of the plot. Right? Just because it felt like sometimes there was just little moments that felt really dated with like, oh, he's kind of following her home right now. This feels like she should have a bigger problem with this, but it's kind of treated like a fun little quirk. Isn't that sweet? He followed her home.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple things wrong with the romance here. A, he is significantly older than her.
Yes.
B, he is her like 4 levels up boss at her job.
Yes.
So that's already a problem. And then C, even with the age difference kept in mind, she is barely 18.
Yes.
Like, just squeaking over. So that's already reason to be skeeved out there.
Yeah, which is why I mean, obviously times were different, I guess, but I can't think of many people when I was 18 who owned a big place on their own, and
right,
you know, like that feels very of a different era to me. But that could be more of like a time period thing than it is like a false thing. But
look, there's eventually going to be a point where people are going to watch these movies and they're just going to be in awe that anyone owns any property at all.
Yeah. To be fair, I mean, I don't know if she owns it. She might just be renting. But even renting, it feels like it's a, you know, it's like this place that used to be a warehouse that she's converted into a dance studio / apartment. Like, again, that feels like a lot for someone who's barely out of school to have accomplished. But, you know. It is what it is. There is some other things that are a bit dated in the movie. Like, there's a character who wants to be a comedian, and almost all of his jokes are all like just xenophobic about Polish people. It's really weirdly specific how much he zones in one group of people.
I actually went onto the Wikipedia article about like Polish racism of like, was this just like a thing that spiked in the 1980s? But like, no, it was just this guy. This one guy has a major problem with Polish people. I'm like, all right, I guess.
Yeah, the only other type I think it's an older fashioned thing that's maybe like, I mean, at least, I mean, obviously actual Polish people might tell you it's alive and well because they're the actual victims of it. But,
right.
But certainly I've seen it pop up in old sitcoms, like All in the Family. Like Archie on that is very sort of, he makes a lot of comments about Polish people, amongst lots of other groups of people, might I add. He's very, you know, if you're not just like a straight white man who's Christian, then you're like scum to him, basically. But he would bring up Polacks a lot. That's the word that was used over and over, and that's what this character uses a lot in this movie in sort of a derogatory way. And I'm like, yeah, I guess this is just a holdover from that previous era. It was, you know, still like whoever wrote this movie still like heard people talk like that in his youth, maybe, and like that's where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, it also kind of works for the idea of this is like a very blue collar town. It makes sense that there would be more like race humor and stuff like that, just based off of the upbringing there. So it then doubles down for the character of when he eventually does end up leaving the town, it doesn't work because it is so catered to just this singular town, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of agree. The main characters, I don't know if I'd say complex, but I'll at least say they do this thing where she's very encouraging of everyone around her, right? And it sort of adds to the heartbreak when their dreams don't pan out, and kind of doubles down on why it maybe like makes her feel like she can't accomplish hers. And I think that at least gives you a character to root for. It's just a shame so much of it's tied to a kind of a dated romance that, you know, maybe it feels strong to call it problematic, but it just feels like this is definitely a movie written in a different time where I think these days you wouldn't feel like this is endearing, you know? Like, and the movie treats it in a way where at one point they're having a fight and like a group of workers all cheer when they make up at the end of the fight. And I just couldn't help but feel like, I don't know if that's the reaction you'd get if you saw a man in his like, you know, late 30s or whatever he is arguing with an 18-year-old like this, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I will say this, in terms of what the movie does, while they do fight very frequently, it is always a thing of she's lashing out at him out of A, she's a child, and B, she has this temper and how like afraid she is of everything just coming crashing down around her. But he never like lashes back. Like, he gets frustrated with her, but there's never like any actual physical abuse or anything like that.
Which obviously it's good that he's not physically abusive or anything like that, but I do think that just further makes the relationship feel weird, though, because as you said, she's lashing out because she's more immature. She is not grown up enough yet, and it just makes it feel like this feels awkward as a couple. It feels like he's taking in this poor girl because he's got money and he can take her in a fancy restaurant with a fancy car and all the rest of it. The movie's also occasionally quite horny. We'll talk about that in spoilers.
Yeah.
It's an R-rated movie, actually. I didn't realize that going in, but like there's F-bombs, there's even a C-bomb at one point, there's a strip bar at one point, there's a reasonable amount of stuff.
I mean, I think it doesn't feel gratuitous. Even when we get to like the strip club and stuff like that, it feels what's required for the movie to make its point, and then it moves on. It doesn't feel like
I mean, I wasn't saying it was. I was just I was expecting a PG-13, and and that's not what it was. It definitely had some things in it that pushes it over that line. So,
but that's what I think I like about it more than something like Dirty Dancing, where it does feel like it is an actual situation. Like, as much as, the giant loft or whatever, just ignoring that, the situation they're in of someone working two jobs, they have this dream, they don't think they're good enough, and they just see all of their friends coming crashing down around them. That feels a lot more real than, oh, daddy took us up to the estate for a vacation and I fell in love with one of the waiters. It's like, all right, well,
no, I think even without the surrounding context, I think just the core idea that this main character is scared of pursuing the dreams because she's scared of failure and being rejected is very relatable and very understandable to almost anyone watching. And I'm going to say it, I think the main character in Dirty Dancing was kind of dull and a bit of a blank charisma slate. Like, Alex is definitely a better character, just outright. So it has that going for it.
Yeah, no, I agree wholesale. I compared to, and I'm not counting Climax in this because Climax is its own beast, but compared to the other two that we've done, I think that this is far and away the most well-made movie. I think that this is something that they had an actual idea for something outside of just, hey, let's sell a cool soundtrack, or hey, let's do a bunch of fun dance scenes. There's an actual plot and reason for it.
Obviously, the main song is from this movie, but I was wondering how many of these other songs in here that I already knew were made famous because they were attached to this. Like, she's a maniac dancing on the floor, whatever that song's called, right?
Maniac.
It's just called Maniac, right?
Yeah.
Was that already a famous song, or was being tied to this movie? Did that make it famous?
I mean, according to the wiki thing, it says is a song from the 1983 film Flashdance. So I assume that it came from this.
So this movie has at least two hits that have kind of, in perpetuity, just been part of the 80s lexicon of music.
Yeah, and then just to add on to that of like how important this movie is for the 80s, this is kind of one of the first movies that really relied on MTV as marketing, because essentially what happened is they put out the movie and then they made very quickly music videos for those songs that came out with it, and then just played it nonstop on MTV, thus getting more people into the theater. I
recognize certain shots in this movie because I've obviously seen the music video for Flashdance, or whatever the song's called.
It's Flashdance ... What a Feeling.
What a Feeling, yeah. Like, I'm sure I've seen that music video just sort of playing in the background numerous times in my life, so I recognize shots of her riding on her bike or welding and stuff. Like those were all kind of like, oh, I recognize this moment. We should probably mention, the direction being good. The director did go on to make Fatal Attraction, and some other things. I've not seen a lot of what he's done. Fatal Attraction is the one that I've seen, but he also did
9.5 Weeks,
Indecent Proposal, Jacob's Ladder, which I have seen, which I actually think that movie's overrated, but it wasn't badly directed. Like, so I'm not placing that on him. So,
and then most recently, Deep Water from 2022,
which is 20 years after his previous movie, so it's a bit of a leap. I don't know.
I'm a little bit concerned by the fact that the last 3 movies he has here, the first word in each of the Wikipedia articles is erotic.
Yeah, clearly he went down a path based on maybe like doing Fatal Attraction, which is kind of an erotic thriller, kind of set him on a. Yeah. And even this movie's kind of erotic in some ways. Like, it's not. It's not overt, but it's just there. So, yeah, spoilers then? We didn't work through the movie?
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. I think it's I mean, it's a very simplistic plot, and we basically already told you how it ended, so spoilers aren't that big of a deal, really, but the individual beats, I guess.
Yeah. I just mean we're going to work through the movie, so I'm going to give them the spoiler warning.
Yeah.
That's all. I'm not asking you for your opinion if spoilers apply
I'm just
here.
saying, like, for the general audience, if for whatever reason you do actually bounce out at spoilers and then listen to the rest later, like, this isn't a big deal if you hear the spoilers, really. You're not missing much.
So, yeah, the movie starts with the main song. I appreciated, much like Dirty Dancing, actually, the score is also based on the song, so you hear little riffs from it sort of sprinkled in throughout, which I actually do really like. If you're going to have like a song that's kind of your linchpin of your whole soundtrack, sort of using that as, bizarrely, like one of the most famous examples is Titanic, because the music from My Heart Will Go On is from James Horner's score. Like, it was obviously developed together in conjunction or based on, whatever. I don't know which one came first necessarily, but so yeah, we're introduced to Alex. She goes to her work, she rides her bike, she's a welder. This is all played out pretty much without any dialogue. It's all just visual. It's almost like a music video, already in and of itself. And
it's just the opening credits rolling over top of it.
Yeah, and then after work, Nick, who's the love interest and doesn't own the company, but he's like high ranking in the construction business. He gets taken to this dance place, and this is where she does the famous dance with the water splashing down on her. And the
specifically not to Maniac, though. I always thought that the water coming down was tied to Maniac, but it's just a totally separate song that I don't think anyone remembers.
No. And the guy who's taking him here is like, hey, you should recognize her. She works for you. He's like, you know her social security number. You give her a paycheck.
That was the creepiest scene for me. Is this? They're talking about how hot this girl is, and they're just like, "Oh man, yeah, I'd like to get to know her." And then the guy just starts listing off numbers, and he's just like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, "Oh, that's her social security number. She works for you." I'm like, "Bro, why do you have that memorized?"
Yeah, that's a little creepy. Yeah, that's fair. We're also introduced at this point to, what was his name here, Richie, who's the cook in this place. Apparently, this dance place also serves burgers.
Well, I think it's a bar first and foremost, and they just happen to have like a catwalk dancing thing going on.
Yeah, it's kind of. I guess obviously it's common for bars to have like a stage for bands and comedians to like play on, but they've got like a little runway stage. So
yeah,
the girls.
I don't know if this is common back in the 80s and it just kind of died out, but it's definitely not something I've seen around it anymore. Either the girls are more naked or they're just a bar.
I will say what's interesting about this place, and the owner's never comes across as that sleazy. He's just kind of like a typical middle-aged schlub who's like, yelling at his employees. But he seems to give them all pretty much creative control, because it seems like they're just allowed to try whatever weird dance routine and costumes they want. And there's he never, like at one point when she's doing the arty one later, he just kind of like rolls his eyes at it like, I don't get this, and walks away. But that tells you that he's just let her do it. He doesn't enforce anything. He just sort of lets them do what they want.
I like to think that it's like a 2-to-1 ratio where it's like you do 2 dances that are definitely sexy, and then you can try your art piece every once in a while.
Yeah, and he also lets Richie do his stand-up comedy. In fact, we're introduced to Richie in the kitchen, and he's making burgers, and he's just trying his jokes, and every single one of them are absolute garbage. They are terrible.
And he has the best thing where he has his own laugh at his own jokes, and he has one of those very distinctive laughs, like high nasally, and like, and I'm like, cool, glad that's a character trait.
It's almost like, because obviously he's dating Jeannie, who's another one of Alex's friends.
Waitress.
Yeah. But Alex is obviously friends with him too. And I feel like, you know what, Alex, I get that you want to like, pep him up and like give him encouragement. But I feel like when he keeps talking about moving to LA to become a famous stand-up comedian, there's a certain responsibility you have as a friend to lean in and say, dude, you're terrible at this.
Yeah. Like, all right, look, how about you go try this out at an actual comedy club in Pittsburgh first, and then you can try LA if that works out.
I mean, he tries it in this bar later. They give him a thing, and he bombs it first. But then when he kind of like just goes off script and says something about how he's going to put roaches in their burgers because they're not laughing at him, they all laugh at that, and he kind of wins them over. But then he kind of just goes back into doing his racist stuff, and it just feels like, this is still bad though. Why are you all laughing now?
That's the thing. He starts off with the racist stuff. They don't laugh. He then wins them over, quote unquote, and then he goes back in the racist stuff, but all of a sudden they're laughing. And I'm like, is this just about warming up the audience? Is that the moral of the story here? Is you can't come out like with the big guns? You gotta
Don't
do
get me
something
wrong.
relatable?
There is a snowball effect to comedy. Once you get people in the mood to laugh, it's easier to make them laugh. That's absolutely a real thing. But I don't think it completely turns kryptonite jokes into gold, you know?
My thing about the whole thing is that obviously the main attraction of this bar is the dancing girls. And you have a comedy act in between girls? That's a death sentence. There's no way he's going to make that work.
I mean, the one thing is that it's only 5 minutes. It's basically like, hey, there's always a bit of downtime between the girls. You can have that 5 minutes to sort of try and win over the audience. Because he very quickly like says, hey, here's the next girl. It's Tina, and she does her thing.
Yeah, I think she was like the S&M one. She was coming out like full leather bound.
Yeah. So, you know, this sets up all the characters. We see that she goes to...
Well, one thing I did want to bring up, you mentioned it earlier, is there's like a backstage like changing area for the dancers. And we specifically get that there's one girl who she's been waiting for a call from this guy, and like he's not calling, and she's getting upset about it. And Alex just keeps on assuring her over and over, like, he's gonna call. Don't worry about it. It's all gonna be fine. And that's when all the other characters basically call her out and say, like, you're always so positive. You're always like so sure that things are gonna work out. Where do you get off being such a ball of sunshine all the time? She's like, whatever. So it sets up that not only who she is as like a person to everyone else, but also that dichotomy of she doesn't think her own thing will work out. So it's that little tension building over the movie.
Yeah. We see her go home, and we see like her place and her dog and all that stuff. And we see her train and practice. We see her on TV. She catches some like classical dancing, like some ballet or whatever it is. And she's sort of watching, and she's sort of trying the moves, and she ends up like practicing by putting on Maniac. And I'll give her this. She is able to tap those feet very quickly, because she is like running in pace to that music like no one's business. She
was dancing like I've never seen anyone dance before. I think I'm out. I think that's all that's really going to work. So
yeah. Honestly, to the point where it almost does a comedy thing at the end of the sequence where it cuts to her like drinking something, and she's so out of breath and like panting. I'm like, honey, I think you may need to go to the hospital. I think you've pushed yourself too far. Like, this is too much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the whole sequence, though, if I remember correctly, it just kind of stops. Like she's dancing and like the music's still playing and whatnot, and then it just like hard cuts to whatever the next scene is. Now that was the point that, once again, much like the water scene, I was like, that's it? Maniac, the song I know from this movie more than anything else, is just done? Okay.
Yeah. But this is obviously her hyping herself up, because she's going to try and do the next step on achieving her dream. And she goes down to the fancy big building where this, ballet dance company are all there, and she goes for the room where they get the applications. That's the word I'm looking for. And she's waiting in a queue, and she walks in, and they do this whole thing where all the other girls who are there are all in like sort of ballet looking outfits. They've all got dance shoes or ballet shoes on, and they do the camera focuses on this because it shows you her work boots. She's came in her work boots because she's only here to pick up. She's not here to dance. She's here to get an application. So it's not like she had to dress for the occasion. But it seems like they're whispering about her. It seems like she feels out of place, and this is where some of that class thing was kind of coming in, where she feels like she doesn't belong, and she ends up chickening out. She decides to just leave. It sort of puts you in the position where you sort of sit with that uncomfortable feeling for a good 30 seconds. And then she just kind of like ditches it. And she actually picks up pace as she's leaving because she ends up running like out of the main sort of foyer area. This to the point where some of the guys are turning around and going, "Why is she running like a maniac on the dance floor?" Ha ha ha. So she ditches all this, and from there, right? And I'm connecting these three scenes together because they kind of reveal a lot about her insecurities. She goes to see her friend, who I think was named Hannah. It's this old lady who used to be a dancer. Yep. And she goes and visits her, and this is something she seems to do often. And she's made her like a dancing outfit for her. She's like stitched her something, and she's like, "Hey, did you go and apply to the so and so?" And she's like, "Oh, I was going to do it yesterday, but I didn't have time." And she lies, right? But it sort of sets you that there is this character who's pushing her to do this stuff. And right after this scene, she goes to church to confession, goes in. And well, the first thing she actually says is, "Father, I've been thinking a lot about getting effed. Like, I love sex. I keep thinking about sex. I can't get it out of my head." And just on this, before we get to the serious part of this scene, this made me chuckle in hindsight because it's really the only little seed for later when she does get really like playful and horny later on. And I'm okay, this is the setup for that. That she's sort of suppressing some sexual feelings as well, whilst everything else is going on. But the important part of this scene is that she's like, "Hey, I lied, because I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but like, I'm scared about that." This is the scene that really sets up like her character fears, her insecurities, and what the movie's going to be about her ultimately overcoming. So, as far as setting up your core idea goes, it's perfectly solid. It does the job. I also thought it was really funny that when she's saying she's thinking about sex, it cuts to the priest and he's just kind of chuckling. He's like, "Haha, she's so embarrassed to admit that."
Oh yeah, the punchline to the joke is she's like, "Oh, I've been thinking about sex. I mean, I'm sure I could like lower that down." Or I think he's just specifically like, "Oh, I'm sure that you don't have a problem with that. I mean, not that you probably would, I guess." Like, just basically trying to call out like, "Yeah, you're a priest. Clearly you don't know about sex stuff, right?"
Yeah. I feel like if this was like a raunchy comedy, the priest would have been like, "No, keep talking dirty, child. Father likes it."
Yeah. No more father. Call me daddy.
That's what I was going for. I was trying to do a bit of wordplay with father and daddy being interchangeable there.
I got you.
Yeah. Anywho, so that sets everything up, and I think also before this scene's probably the first time that Nick, the love interest, tries to talk to her at work. It doesn't go very far the first time, but I think that first interaction has probably happened by now.
There's also a bit, again, I'm not sure if it's by this point, but there's a bit where her and Jeannie are doing laundry down at the laundromat, and as they're coming back home, they pass by like an actual strip club.
I think this is just after this, I think this is where they introduce this, and they set up that they're friends, and we get a guy that I can only describe. His character name's Johnny C, played by Lee Ving, but he looks like the lead singer of Good Charlotte to me. That's what I was seeing when he popped up.
I get that. Yeah. I could see that.
I was getting that vibe. But he's like just yelling, "Hey, nude girls, $5, come and see nude girls." And then when these two walk past them, he starts, aggressively flirting, we'll call it, where he's like, "Hey, baby, you want to come in my fancy car with the leather seats? I'll take you for a ride and I'll show you this and I'll show you that." He's all...
But he like knows them. He calls them out by name, and it seems like he's been trying to convince them to ditch their current place of work and come dance here.
Yeah, it's the exact same, but your tops are off. Like it's that's all it is. That's what he's trying to say.
And you get tips like while you're dancing, because with their current place, they don't have like dollar bills in their G-strings or anything.
Yeah, I'm not even sure how much they're even being paid for dancing at the bar they dance at. Because I mean, she still has a full-time job. Like that's kind of like part of the points of the movie, which means that this is more about the enjoyment of dancing than it is about the payday necessarily.
Yeah, for sure.
Which Alex fires back to Vinny or Johnny C just before they leave, where she's like, "Hey, did you ever hear that the smallest recorded penis is 1.7 inches?"
Which he's not even calling him out, but he's just like, "Yeah, all right." Like he's just telling on himself at that point.
I mean, I'm like, where did she read this exactly? Wikipedia wasn't around at the time.
Yeah, she went down to the library, pulled out the encyclopedias, and she's like, "Huh, what do you know?"
I don't want it on my search history, David. I want you to Google smallest penis size.
Smallest penis size.
I'm fact checking this.
About 1.6 inches.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, so it's not.
It says in a study. I don't know if the
Okay.
study was like worldwide, everybody clearly, but like it says that the smallest in the study was 4 centimeters long, erect.
Of course, I mean, that's where you measure it naturally. Yeah. Okay. Just okay. I can't believe that's still accurate 40 years later.
Yeah.
41
Mankind
years
has
later.
not progressed that much.
We've only went down 0.1 of an inch. Like, come on, humanity, we can go lower.
Is that really a goal we want to try to push?
I mean, not for the guy that has it. Like, I'm sure he's miserable.
I was gonna say, is this what Darwin wanted?
Okay, I don't want you to search for the largest though, because that one won't make me feel as good.
Actually, it came up in the exact same thing.
Oh, did it?
26 centimeters, 10.2 inches.
Oh, fair enough. I love the moment of pause there where we're clearly both visualizing how long that is.
I was kind of hoping you were gonna give like a, oh, is that all?
I'm too modest for that. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
Gotcha.
I'm not going to pretend anything silly here. Come on, like,
Man, this is something that should be hidden behind Patreon. Are you kidding me? This is top tier stuff.
There's a genuine, like, a bit of analysis here that someone could do on the male, like, gender, where we heard one comment making fun of a small penis, and it's led to a discussion of us talking about penis sizes and just how obsessed we are as a gender about that detail.
I want there to be a study of going to men and saying the length of the longest penis and then measuring the pause afterwards and seeing how that correlates.
Well, you think the bigger the pause, the bigger the difference compared to them? Is that what you're saying?
I think so. I'd say so.
Okay. All right. Anyway, let's move on from this shady conversation. This is all in good fun, though, everyone.
Yes,
It's fine.
yes, absolutely.
Yes. Whether you've got a 1-inch penis or a 10-inch penis, you're more than welcome.
Well, if you got a
sure.
1-inch penis, you set the record. Congratulations.
True. All right, so that sets up this character is who's going to be popping in and out of the movie. Honestly, one of the hardest things about remembering it's easy to remember the order of all the main plot bits, but there's so many things interspersed throughout the movie that it's actually quite hard to remember the order of it all. So I think we might just sort of tackle a character's like subplot and kind of just go through it that way from here.
I think the only thing that I would say here, because it has zero plot relevance, is I think it's immediately following this point, is where Jeannie and Alex just kind of roam about town for a while. Is this where we get like the breakdancing thing?
This is the breakdancing, yeah.
Yeah, so they roam about town, they come across...
Actually, do you know I said earlier that the breakdance is more impressive here? I think that the actual dancing is as well, but I think the reason why it looks so much better, and it's the thing I said in Breaking, is that as soon as you do close-ups of like different parts, it removes what makes it look special as a dance. This was in a wide shot the entire time. It cut ahead in time where more of a crowd was forming, but it was a wide shot the entire time where you could always see the dancers' bodies head to toe, so you could appreciate the movements that were happening sort of throughout, because it's sort of like ripple effects and things like that, right? You know?
But yeah, so they see the breakdancer, and like you said, crowd forms. They spend some time there, and then there's a scene shot, whatever you want to call it, of them crossing the street, and there's a traffic cop there.
Oh, I forgot about this.
They just like mess with for a while, and it's all in good fun. It's not like he's like angry at them, but like they're imitating his movements, and like he's like putting on a little like dance routine himself. I have no idea what the sequence was for, but it was fun, at least.
I think it's just trying to show that there's kind of a community here that all know them, and they're all friends with each other by and large. Even the sleazy guy Johnny C like knows them by name. It doesn't feel. I mean, he does go across some lines later on for sure, but it doesn't feel like in general they feel scared of their surroundings in any way or like that. You know?
Yeah.
Then it's like they're at Jeannie's for dinner, and we've found out either during this scene or before that she's the waitress at the club, obviously the bar, but she is not a dancer, at least in the same way. She's a skater. She's an ice skater. She does sort of ice skating in a sort of dancing way, and she wants to learn to dance. And Alex says, "I'll teach you if you teach me how to skate." So the scene after the dinner scene is like them both out on an ice rink, and so she's practicing, and Alex is like trying to just move successfully.
But I think importantly, during the dinner, they have Jeannie's parents, and Jeannie's dad is just 100% unsupportive of his daughter's hopes and dreams here.
He spins everything in the most positive or the most possible negative light that he can. Like it's really quite something. He doesn't like that she's dating Richie. He thinks he's a bum. He makes that very clear. He complains about how much money it costs to buy her ice skates and stuff like that. Even though she's got like a full-time job now, seemingly, but you know, whatever. But basically, he's just always complaining and doesn't think it's going to be that impressive. And again, Alex is this voice of positivity. She jumps in and says, "No, you should come and see her. Like, she's going to do this show in like a couple of weeks or whatever it is. Come and see it. You'll be impressed." Which is what her plot is building up to at this point in the movie, is this show. Which we can skip ahead. I think we could just stick with Jeannie's plot here. Jeannie does have this ice skating show. Everyone goes to it that should, right? You know, her boyfriend's there, her parents are there. Her dad's complained that it's cold and how long is this going to take and so on. But she comes out and there's a spotlight on her. She's doing her dance routine.
To the song Gloria, by the way, which, again, great song.
Yeah, I recognize this one too. I couldn't have named it, but I did recognize it. But she flubs. She falls down during the dance routine. And it's kind of this quiet moment where like Alex is sitting in the stands going, get up, come on, get up and just, you know, finish the dance, even though you've fallen. But she doesn't, right? This is kind of a sad story where she isn't able to, and someone comes out in the ice and helps her up and takes her back. And honestly, one of the sweeter moments in the whole movie might be the dad, for the first time, like, when they come to see her backstage, he sits down next to her and she's looking really sad and she says, "Sorry, Dad," as if she's let him down. And he goes, kid, you bounce good. You know, he cracks a joke about her landing on the ice and it cheers her up a little bit. It was actually kind of nice because it was like, okay, you know what? I've been a dick this whole time, but now she's actually in a moment of like depression and like, you know, getting over this, what's just happened to her. He actually tries to be a dad and like reassures her that he loves her. It's almost like he couldn't see how important it was to her until he saw how badly it hurt her that it all fell apart.
Well, that was during the sequence as well. Before she goes on, he's just complaining, and then during the sequence, you see him like on the edge of the seat, like, "Oh man, look at her, she's fantastic." Like he understands it as it's happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff cut into the stands during the sequence, with the various reactions to everything.
Yeah.
But then her story takes a bit of a worse turn down the line, because when Richie leaves, we'll talk about him separately, but when Richie leaves to go to LA, he's basically, you know, broke up with her for that. And she ends up working with Johnny C. There's like one scene where Johnny C like tips her $100, and it's obviously to try and endear her to him. He says it's not. He says it's an apology, but you kind of get that he's being slimy and he's trying to like woo her over. And sure enough, when Alex is looking for her later in the film, she's got a job now at his dance club, the nude bar.
The strip club.
Yeah. So we get this big scene where Alex comes in and like pulls her off down off the stage and like drags her out almost against her will with a coat around her. But then when they get outside, she kind of breaks down, starts crying, and it is like clear she probably did need this help. This was one of those scenes though where I was sort of looking at it and thinking, there is kind of like a weird dated like quality to this, because there's definitely an attitude in more recent times of respecting sex workers and that it's like a valid profession, and this definitely treats it as, no, if you've made that choice in your life, there's something's wrong with it and you're going down a bad path kind of thing.
I think the way that you fix that is by making it clear that this place is like slimier and is like not on the up and up. I don't think that because this is the only time we ever go inside of the club, I don't think that they did enough to really send that home. I think that it seems pretty much like any other strip club that you would come across. Honestly, it's pretty close to their own dance place itself. So I think they needed that little extra thing to say, like, it's okay to have this sort of job. Obviously, they have no problem dancing and taking off some amount of clothes on stage, but this place specifically is slimy and gross, and you shouldn't be here.
Yeah. Yeah, and given the way Johnny C treats some people, that's also maybe something that helps out with that. But I couldn't help but think about it from the context of, like, in the modern sense, like someone saying, "Oh, you've got an OnlyFans page, you should take that down. Like, your life is ruined," and like really making them feel shitty about it. And I was like, that kind of thought process is a little bit dated.
I mean, it also comes with what we know about Jeannie, is that you know, she was never a dancer at the original place. She was just a waitress. So clearly she didn't want that kind of attention or didn't want to be in that position. And here she's been more or less forced into it because of her relationship with Johnny C. So yeah, it's I can see where you're coming from with that, but I think the movie differentiates it enough that it still kind of works even in a modern setting.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's like, I'm not saying it's like I like super, like it's just a little bit there where I was sort of thinking about it as it was playing out. Yeah. So that was basically her thing. Richie, alternatively, you know, he, after his little stand-up bit, which we already kind of talked about, he just kind of randomly shows up at Alex's place one night saying that he's leaving, that he's going to LA. He's got his car packed and he's just going to drive there. And she's like, yeah, but what about Jeannie? And he's like, she'll be fine. And she hugs him goodbye, says that she'll miss him. And it's, you know, it's just sweet enough. They have a decent enough friendship.
Yeah.
But of course, he just shows back up. But they're all having a costume party at the bar, like later in the movie. And he just shows up. And look, the boss just sort of like jokes, see, I told you you'd never make it in LA. Get back to slinging burgers. And it's all treated kind of nice enough, except for the fact that he sees Jeannie and it's a bit cold with her, and that's when you find out she's now with this sleazeball. So I do appreciate, though, that it never does a thing later on in the film where she goes back with him, because I think it's okay that there's consequences for what he did to her. You know, he shouldn't just be taken back because he's come back, but she shouldn't necessarily go to the first, you know, creep that is, you know, dangling some money in front of her, you know?
I think this movie, because again, it's all about, okay, you try something, you follow your dreams, it doesn't work out. It doesn't pretend like there aren't consequences to that. It shows you like, yeah, no, it's going to interrupt some stuff. Like there are consequences to if your dream fails. But ultimately, what I think the movie's trying to say is that it's nothing that isn't like irreversible. Like you can always manage to get back to a steady level in the end. Like he went out to LA, it didn't work out. He came back. There's still a job waiting for him. Like even if it isn't what he wants out of life, he is able to get back to a level that he feels steady at. And then obviously Jeannie falls a little bit further with the strip club thing in that she doesn't get back to a steady level because she fell in with a bad crowd there. But the implication is after Alex gets her out of there that she is going to get back onto that once more. So I think that's kind of the idea that pushes Alex further down her plot is she sees her friends failing, but ultimately they come back. They manage to make it work for them and things are okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And in some ways she has to help them come back, you know, but Jeannie specifically, she has to be there for her. But, you know, that realization that she has these people around her too, who'll be there for her, is obviously one of those things that she's kind of like accepting. And even the boyfriend character, as much as we might think the romance itself is a little iffy.
Yeah. One thing with Richie's plot I wanted to bring up, though, is there's a sequence where I think it's Alex. Johnny C starts hitting on Alex, and then Alex pours a beer in his lap.
Yes.
And so at the end of that night, she's leaving the bar with Richie, and Johnny's just waiting there in the parking lot and is basically going to assault her. And he ends up punching Richie in the face as well. So that's the point where, you know, Richie definitely has some bad blood with Johnny at this point. There's definitely a build up there. But the end of the scene is just, you know, he says he's all right. He goes home and the boyfriend is the one who ends up saving Alex in the end.
Yeah. He's not quite the boyfriend yet, but he's sort of like in the process of trying to like woo her, and he's kind of around. Yeah. It's probably the most like the worst that any character ever acts in this, because it feels like he is waiting in the car park just to confront her and possibly do something really bad with his friend. It's, you know, it's hard to gauge exactly how far he's willing to go. Yeah, I think the other character, obviously we brought up earlier, was Hannah, the old lady who's encouraging her to go dancing and try out for these bigger things. We find out that she was a dancer and that she had some success, but maybe didn't quite reach what she wanted. There's a whole sequence like in the middle or so of the movie where she takes Alex to a big dance recital, the big ballet or whatever it is, and afterwards she's like, hey, did they always give flowers to the lead dancer? And she's like, yeah, always. Like, oh, how, you know, can you tell me how that feels? And she's like, oh no, you can tell me how that feels. And it kind of implies that, well, she's got a history as a dancer, she maybe never quite made it to like the levels that she dreamed of. And that's kind of like hits home later, because when she dies later in the film suddenly, which is kind of the final like bad, you know, it's like the other two friends like tried their dreams and failed, and that's kind of like beat 1, beat 2, and then beat 3 is that this old woman dies, and when Alex goes to her place and looks around her stuff, she sees the old, ballet shoes and stuff. She sees like all these, elements of like this woman ended up dying in this home, far away from her dreams and kind of living to regret it, which is kind of like makes her sad, but also ultimately is a lesson for her to kind of push herself to actually go through with the final edition at the end.
Yeah, especially because I think Hannah, it's made very clear that she is pushing Alex to do the things that she was unable to do. She's pushing Alex, like, follow your dreams, make it big. You have talent, and nothing should be able to hold you back if you just, try for it. And obviously there's this idea in the end that, like, the last words that we actually hear her say to Alex, as Alex is like, I don't know if I'm going to be good enough. And she's like, you will. You're going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. And that's obviously not enough to get Alex in the moment, but when she finds out that Hannah's dead, it shakes her and says like, yeah, all right, I got to do this.
Yeah, because obviously we have to sort of work back round to the boyfriend plot now, which again, some of these bits are weird. In fact, it's after that Johnny scene where he gets kind of threatening and the boyfriend kind of comes in and breaks it up, where he says, hey, I'll give you a lift home. And she's like, no, I've got my bike. It's fine. And that's when he follows her home. And it's played like she's looking around and like smiling at him as she realizes she's being followed. But I feel like that's not the natural reaction to this.
Nah. I also, during that sequence where he intimidates Johnny responds with like, hey man, this ain't your turf no more. And it really gives this backstory that we get a tiny bit of elaboration on later, that like he, as much as he is the like owner of this construction company or whatever, he came from the streets. He came from a bad place as well. So he knows Alex's situation here.
Which maybe even ties into why he's attracted to her. Because the whole thing with his ex-wife later is that, she was this rich girl from a nice family, and it was like what he felt he was supposed to do, and he realized that's not what he wanted. So maybe he's attracted to her because she comes from a background that's actually similar to his. He doesn't want someone who comes from money. He wants someone who... Well, maybe I'm giving him too much of benefit of the doubt here, but that feels like maybe...
No, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, based off of what they were saying there, I think it makes sense of, like, the idea of... I mean, I think that his entire character comes down to his final little monologue of saying, you don't worry about, like, what's expected of you. Don't do any of that stuff. You have to live your dreams, because if you give up on your dreams, you may as well be dead.
Yeah, because so he finally like convinces her to go out. In fact, it's actually going to the ice skating thing, but I think it's technically their first date. And then they get pizza after. They're back at her place. They seemingly end up having sex because he wakes up there the next day. They build up to the first kiss and all that. They get to know each other, whatever. And then they have like a bit of a montage where they go to the steel mill and they have an intimate moment there. It's a whole thing. And then at the ballet thing, when she's there with the old lady, Hannah, she sees her with this other woman in a fancy car and thinks, wait a minute, what is this bullshit? And she follows him, almost coming back around to when he followed her. She follows him on her bike to his house, thinking that he's a married man who's cheated on her, who's lied to her, and she throws her like a rock through his window and cycles into the night.
Not even that he's a married man, just he was with another woman. That's all it took to set her off. It's just like, no, I thought that we were being exclusive here. How dare you? And he just smashes her window.
That's what it looks like, though, because it looks like he drives home with this woman. I mean, clearly, I don't think he did, but it looks like that from the context of everything. And when she blows up at him at work when he tries to talk to her, he's like, hey, what did I do wrong? What's going on? And he's like, you were with that blonde woman at the dance thing. And they start fighting in front of all of the other construction workers. And he's like, what? That's my ex-wife. She's part of the arts committee that I'm still tied to. I have to go to this thing once a year. That's all it is. And he's trying to explain to her. Which, just FYI, dude, maybe explain before the night happens that this is something you have to do every year so that there's no chance of any misunderstanding. Maybe?
I mean, he had no idea she was going to be there, and I get it of like, why would he bring it up if it wasn't even going to be a thing that she would know about, and it's completely platonic. I understand from his perspective. I just need to talk for a moment about the coworkers in this scene.
Who get even the woman who's at the sandwich cart who's like selling stuff, she's like giving all these reaction shots during this fight.
Best. I love, because that's the whole thing, is that he he walks up, he offers to pay for her sandwich, and she's just like, keep it. I don't want anything from you. Stay out of my life. And she just gives the side eye to him, just like, what did you do? And she's just taking in all the drama. And then as they're walking by the rest of the coworkers, everyone's just on their lunch break. So they're just watching this unfold. And it's like, yeah, this is great. I love it. It's fantastic.
And then the relationship's going well, and there's a scene where they're at dinner and they're at a fancy restaurant. And I think this is after he's already talked to her a lot about why he split up with his wife and, you know, like the fact that he didn't come from money. And even here in the restaurant, he's like, hey, I used to dream of having dinners in a place like this because I was so poor growing up. And I think this is kind of a famous outfit she's wearing, actually. Even before she takes off the jacket, she's got like it looks like a sort of like fancy tux thing she's sort of wearing.
It's like the white part of the tux, not like a full shirt, but like the little flap down in front.
Yeah, but she's got like a sort of jacket on over it, so you can't really tell that it's not like, you know, obviously when she takes it off and you realize it's more of like a tank top that's really sexy, that's a different thing. But the ex-wife shows up and starts saying, oh, you must be Alex. He's told me so much about you. And she starts like throwing these like jabs, like, oh, I bet you took you here on the first date, just like he did with me. Yeah, he did, didn't he? It's the same thing. And then Alex hits back with, yeah, and I screwed his brains out.
Screwed his brains out on the first date too. And she's just like, of course you did.
Yeah, she keeps trying to make all these little slutty comments to her. And Alex just, you know, just steamrolls through it, does not give a shit. Just tries to upstage her. And she's also playing footsie with Nick in this scene as well. No.
Footsie implies foot to foot.
Okay, foot to cock, yeah.
Yes. This is footsie 2.0 we got going on here, as the ex-wife approaches at that.
Yeah. But even this entire scene, like, as much as it started off with a serious talk about his upbringing, a lot of the dialogue here is actually her seductively eating the lobster and like sort of looking at him all sexy, where she's like, and he's like, oh, how's the lobster? And she's like, it sucks. I'm like, all right, movie, calm down. I
think she says something along the lines of like, what turns you on? And I'm like, did that have a different meaning back in the 80s? And then she starts sucking on the lobster tail. I'm like, nope, it's the same meaning.
It's the same. I will say, right, she's a very attractive woman. There is nothing sexy to me about eating food, especially greasy food, right?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I agree. But it was a two-part thing. One, eating the food, not sexy. However, as her process of eating the food was like her twirling her tongue around it. And I can see that being sexy. But I agree, this sequence overall, I was just like, that just seems really inconvenient. And you should probably just eat that normally. Yeah.
I wasn't even sure what she was eating at first until I said lobster, because it wasn't like an obvious part of a lobster. It was just like a bit of the meat, if you will. But yeah, that bit of lobster was about 1.7 inches, so
she can handle him then.
So that's all playing out, and then the final sort of like bit of drama that comes from the movie is he convinces her as well that she should try out for this place, for the the ballet place,
along with everything else that's happened with like Hannah and all that. And
she does so, and she goes to do it. She signs up. And then he goes in after, and we see him make a phone call saying, hey, I need to call in a favor. Are you still part of the arts department? And it's basically not so much that it'll give her a free pass, but you don't even get an audition with this place unless they invite you after your application. And he's just kind of like skipping that part of the process. And he does it behind her back, right? And he kind of lets it slip when she's wanting to celebrate. And this is like the bit where she dances a little bit in the steel mill because she gets up and twirls and the smoke's all around her. And she's all happy because she's got the good news. She's going to get to audition. He accidentally lets it slip that he kind of prepped for this fancy dinner a night in advance. She's like, wait a minute, how could you have known? And she realizes that he's like done this. He's used some of his connections to make sure she gets this opportunity. And I get why she's pissed at that. I do. I think what's interesting to look at here, and I think this is something that she also kind of herself needs to kind of learn or like sort of come to with this, is that like she knows one of the reasons why she was so insecure before this is because this place looks for like, oh, list all your previous dance schools and list all this stuff. This first step is stacked against her because she comes from a different background. Right. And effectively, having someone with connections help her just get past that, but still have to audition, still have to impress the judges, still have to like show that she's capable of being in there. is probably a necessary step. But obviously, I get why she's pissed. I get why she feels that this has been handed to her, like she's not achieved it on her own.
Yeah, I think that's what really works for the character, though, is that because of everything we've seen up to this point, you get the feeling that she's had to work for everything in her life.
Yeah.
Nothing has ever been handed to her. And this dream that she's been going after, this is, like you said, it's not the whole thing, but this first step of it is directly handed to her. And it just feels wrong to her. It just feels like this isn't the way to do it. I need to do this on my own. I didn't want any help in this sort of way. So, yeah, no, it makes complete sense from a character standpoint as to why she freaks out about this and basically tells him to go screw himself.
And probably the best scene that he has is the scene where he confronts her about this at her place and basically says, you're using me as an excuse because you're too scared to try the audition. And this is a convenient way of saying that you shouldn't do it without admitting that it's because you're scared. And he's right. Like, for all the other faults that I may have with this character or this relationship, he's absolutely right in this case. She's been given an opportunity and she's going to pass it up because she can technically say, oh, this isn't right because of this, or this is, sullied because of this element. And that's what the final part of the movie is. It's her, sucking it up, right? Being motivated by all the other things around her. She's going to quit even dancing at the bar. She goes to get her stuff. And it's actually kind of the bitchier woman who, like, we've barely seen throughout the movie, but she was there in that opening, like, dressing room scene, and she was the one being kind of negative about everything. And she's like, oh yeah, when I was your age, I, like, spent every cent I had on outfits, and I was really passionate, and I'm still here. And it's almost like this bit of, like, a story from someone who's being negative is, like, also a bit of motivation. It's like, I don't want to be her. I don't want to end up being this better.
I took that as the exact opposite side. I saw that as the flip. I saw it as, so she comes in to pack up all of her stuff, and the negative woman's just like, oh, hey, well, like, why are you doing that? And she starts off negative. But then when she realizes that normal, cheery ball of sunshine Alex is genuinely upset and is super sad about this, she flips and she shares the story about, like, how back in the day, she wanted to be a dancer, and she bought all of these clothes, and then one day, like, after years of nothing happening, it just never quite worked out. One day she just stopped buying these clothes. She stopped buying costumes, and they just started rotting away. And it's this sort of cautionary tale she's telling her of, like, don't give up on your dreams. If you have something that you want to go for it. And obviously she doesn't know Alex's whole situation, but, like, there's enough that she can really follow this and say, like, you're quitting this dancing job. We know you enjoy dancing. Don't give up on it, you know?
Yeah, no, you're right. I just kind of meant that it is a cautionary tale, like you said. It's the negative side of this is, like, if you don't try, you could, like, because this is the thing, this character from the start of the movie was the bitter one. She was the one who was, she's obviously doing something nice here by trying to, like, okay, I'm going to break my usual shtick and try and help her, but that is the part of it, is this cautionary tale. So I mean, the final part of the movie is her going to the audition, and she does fail at first. She actually flubs right at the start of the song and says, I'm going to restart, and goes and starts the record again. And obviously it's the main song. We're back to What a Feeling. And she's, jumping and moving around, and, the camera's doing a good job at sort of giving it a flow. I did think it was funny how almost all of these judges were kind of characters in a way. Like, there's one guy just with a big cigar the whole time, and I'm like, this is not what I expected for these judges, but fair enough.
I really appreciated this scene in that we kind of worked in everything we've seen across this movie so far. Like, there's one point where she does the spinning breakdancing thing of, like, just seeing that guy on the street and whatnot. She does, like, a bunch of, like, flips and tumbles and such like that. She
spins like her ice skater friend.
Yep, spins like the ice skater. She works in all of these things she's seen before, and of course she impresses the judges implicitly. It doesn't actually show the judges, like, giving her full scholarship.
They're tapping their feet. They're clearly enjoying the show, and then obviously the ending's her going outside, and Nick's waiting there with the roses, and she hugs them all happy, clearly showing that she, like,
the lead dancer always gets flowers.
I didn't even think that's a nice callback to that. Very good.
Yep.
Very good. You're right. So no, that's all fine. The sequence is done or shot well enough. It's got, like, sort of energy and a movement to it, especially when she's sort of like the camera sort of, like, tracking behind the heads of the judges, and she's sort of like pointing at them as she's going down the table one by one, things like that. There's a sense of energy and motion to it. The direction's pretty solid throughout. And I don't know where it took place, but like 2/3 out of the movie, there was the weird art house dance she did where she was like looking at a TV or a fake TV.
I'm not even sure that was her, because obviously there are like several dancers that are dancing.
It was hard to
give it enough focus.
Yeah, it was hard to tell because she was wearing like complete face paint, but the hair looked similar to hers, so I thought it was her.
All right. When you were watching this, were you watching this like on a big TV in a dark room?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have a goddamn seizure at this point? Because I sure as hell was close, man. There was a strobe light effect. It was not okay.
It did occur to me that there probably should be an epilepsy warning before the movie.
Because it's not even just like 5 seconds of it. It is a solid like 30-something seconds of a very powerful strobe light. And if you're watching in a dark room, I don't think it's okay, honestly.
Imagine seeing it in the theater when it's the tower wall that's strobing at you.
Jesus.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. I mean, it ends very suddenly. It's very quick. You know, the movie's like 95 minutes. It ends. And not that I'm saying that I feel like there should have been more, but it's just, it's over already. It's done. Okay. We're not even going to get like it's just final beat. Because the whole story of the movie is her having the courage to try and go for her dream. And you assume that she got accepted and she's going to go to this school now or go to this dance company. But at the same time, if you wanted to read this final moment of her just being happy that she went through with it, regardless of, being accepted or not, that could work too. Like,
yeah, the point of the movie is that she tried. It doesn't matter whether or not she succeeded in it. All that matters is that she went in there, she performed for them, and whatever the answer is, at least she tried to follow her dreams rather than being scared of it.
Yeah. So there's a nice simple message here, which I think works better for me than the other movies that we've done so far. It's a character I think is more relatable than some of the others. And while the trend of a girl who's maybe a bit too young for the guy who's a bit too old is continued here, the main character herself was a lot more engaging and relatable than I think the character in Dirty Dancing was. And then Breaking's just kind of a weird comparison, to be honest. I would say that this movie in structure feels similar to Breaking in the sort of the quota of dance like sequences, right? And how sort of like thin the plot kind of is in some ways. But this is much better directed than Breaking. So in a weird way, it feels like a sort of combination of those two first movies we did, but with a little bit better direction. Yeah,
it's taken like this one definitely has a better plot to it. But I'd say just the way that it flows, the way it looks like the sequence where she's running away from the ballet company in the first part, and it's across this big hall. You get like this parallax motion of these pillars in the way of her as she's running away. I cannot imagine a world where Breaking considered that as a shot. Like, there's no way the director even thought that was capable. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they had like a dolly or a crane when they were doing Breaking. They had one tripod. They maybe had some handheld.
They had a tripod and some roller skates. They were hoping for the best.
I mean, I'm joking. I'm sure there was probably some crane shots in Breaking, but it does feel like it's just got a more of a visual sense, which is probably, I didn't even realize it was tied so heavily to the early days of MTV, but I can totally see that some of it does look like a music video, but it works in this case because it is so tied to dancing and music. So,
I mean, just to really point out there though, with the MTV thing, this movie had a crazy long release. Like, it stayed in theaters for a ridiculously long time because of the MTV stuff. That basically it started off slow. Not a lot of people went to see it initially, and then MTV advertising started kicking in, and then it was just a continuous stream of people who were just, oh, hey, Flashdance, that's in theaters, let's check that out.
Yeah, I mean, obviously theater runs were much longer back then anyway, but that's, definitely something that was possible back then, whereas these days, like, unless you're maybe Avatar 1 that's in theaters for like 7 months, that's a rare exception, though. So,
or Titanic's. Pretty much James Cameron.
James Cameron, yeah. If you're James Cameron, you get to be in theaters for a long time because your movie makes a lot of money.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just a different world in that sense. yeah, definitely more visually interesting. Obviously, I think Dirty Dancing is definitely more beloved than this one is, and probably is seen as having the better. That movie does deal with bigger subjects in a lot of ways, but I think I think this movie works better for me as a film than that one does.
Yeah, I get that. I think, like I said, I think that this movie does a fantastic job of fleshing out Alex as, and her entire supporting cast, honestly, as like real people who go through real things. Dirty Dancing always felt like it was kind of a snow globe world where anything outside of the estate doesn't matter. It's just all about what's happening here and now. But this one makes it feel like, honestly, did you get any sort of sense of how much time passed in this movie from like beginning to end?
Not really. It was difficult to gauge.
Yeah, but it definitely felt like a decent amount of time passed, enough for Richie to like leave and come back, enough for Jeannie to leave her job and then start this other one. It felt like this was almost possibly like an entire year out of their life almost of just working through this stuff.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to rate Flashdance? Seems like we are.
Yeah, sure. So I would say, while I do think this one, as I said, is much better on like a technical scale, much better on a directing and whatnot than Dirty Dancing, I do think I still had more fun with Dirty Dancing, though. I think that one was just more of like, sit back and just enjoy the ride. As much as it isn't like critically well done, I think that it is still a much more fun movie. So I'm gonna give this one the same score of a 7.5, but it's for different reasons. I think that this one is very well made. It's got good direction, good characters, decent plot to it. I love the soundtrack. Like, there's at least 4 or 5 songs that I would just play on my own. But I think that it's just missing that extra little X factor that Dirty Dancing has of just making it fun the whole way through. That is just going to keep it at the same level.
Yeah, I don't remember having that much fun, but that's fine. I think this is better than Dirty Dancing. I think it's obviously better than Breaking.
Yeah.
It looks better and the music's better, and I think that accounts for a lot in a movie like this. I do still think that in some ways it feels like it could probably have more character drama in it. Like it could go even deeper with its main ideas. And definitely there's a few dance sequences that I think are just a bit overkill. But I guess that, kind of like a slasher movie has to have a kill every 10 minutes to make sure the audience is getting what they're wanting. You have to have a dance number every 5 minutes so that the audience is getting what they want in a movie like this. And I find that a little bit tiring, but I can't fault the overall vibe of this one. I think the vibe of this is better. So I am going to say this is good and give it a 7.
Okay.
Which is the highest I've rated any of these dancing movies so far.
Only gonna get better.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm not convinced of that, but we'll see.
I will say I am actually very happy, having watched this now, that Billy Elliot did not win the vote, because it is a very similar plot. Like, beat for beat, it is almost identical.
So it stole the plot of Dirty or Flashdance, you're saying. Billy Elliot's a sham.
To some extent. Like, it's got its own original stuff going on. It's set in like Ireland during the Troubles, but it's pretty much the same kind of thing going on.
So instead of water being poured on them, it's like clover leaves and silver shamrocks. It's like
yes, that's all Ireland has. That is right.
It's like top of the morning to you.
Yep. Everyone in that movie is just the stereotype of Lucky from the Lucky Charms commercials. That's it. Look,
at the time of recording, it was St. Paddy's Day like a day ago or 2 days ago.
Yeah,
so
fair.
It's the stereotypes are fresh in the brain. Plus, Tim's tortures made me watch all the Leprechaun movies. So this is my revenge
again?
No, not again, but just in general.
Oh, okay.
The pain's still fresh. So this is my revenge on Ireland as a whole.
That's fair.
I blame them, even though very few people from Ireland are involved in those movies. But that's besides the point. You started.
They made the mythology. Yes. How dare they?
The mythology comes from them, so I blame them.
Yeah.
Anyway, as for making the collection, I still think this is just cutting it close. I don't think it's a yes.
I will agree, but I think it's like right up on the edge of actually making the collection. I think that this one, if it, like you said, if it went a bit deeper on the character drama, I think I would probably like just watch this again in my downtime.
Yeah, I just don't think it's quite there to saying it's something you need. Like, sure, check it out once to sort of cross off a famous title off your list, maybe, but I don't think it's a keeper necessarily.
Yeah, super quick too. It's only 97 minutes, so.
Yeah. So we're staying in the 80s next week because we'll be looking at Footloose, another big famous dance movie.
Oh boy, and I've already got the song playing in my head.
Yes. This one does have John Lithgow in it. And I do like John Lithgow, so.
That's fair. I'm not sure how much he's going to be dancing, but that's fair.
Doesn't matter. If John Lithgow's in it and he's the one character not dancing, do you want me to like him anymore? Because I don't know if you can make me like him any more than that.
That's fair. I forgot who I was talking to for a minute there.
Plus, I've actually seen this before, so
okay.
The fact that John Lithgow's the one making everyone not dance just means he's the hero of the movie. So, perfect.
He walks in and he says, "Hey, everybody, dancing stupid." And you're like, "Give this man an Oscar."
You just got Lithgowed. All right. So, I said at the start, we got bonus shows over at Patreon if you want to support all the content and help keep the lights on and keep Collector's Cut coming, keep Ace coming, keep Screams After Midnight coming, all the various movie podcasts that we do. Me and David do 2 bonus shows for our patrons every month. Every patron gets access to the Criterion Cut, where we do movies from the Criterion Collection, so super highbrow stuff, classic foreign films, all that kind of thing. And then the other show we do at the $5 tier and up is called Extra Reels, where we do some of the worst things ever made. Hopefully so bad they're good. We've done Neil Breen movies, we've done Miami Connection, we've done Troll 2. It's been a whole host of, well, shit, sliding down the edge of a grotty bathroom wall.
That's really going to make people want to pay. Good job with the mental imagery there.
People love it, though. The patrons seem to. It's their favourite show, honestly.
Yeah.
So yes, that is something you can go do to help support all the content. But either way, thank you for joining the show. We always appreciate you coming along for the ride. We're halfway through dance season, so if you're annoyed and want us to get to something more interesting, I completely understand. I feel the same way, audience. I want to get to a better season as well.
Or if you want more of it, make your voices known and we'll do a season 2 next year.
That is so not happening. It's so not happening. And it's just a flat no. So thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next time. Keep watching movies. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.